The Louboutin heel caught Amaka's ribs before her brain registered the movement. She collapsed onto the polished granite of Gangnam's Starfield COEX Mall, her body folding instinctively around her stomach as luxury shopping bags exploded across the floor like confetti. Blood filled her mouth where her teeth had cut into her lip. The Christmas tree above her, 50 feet of imported Norwegian pine, swam in and out of focus. Standing over her, his face contorted with the same disgust she remembered from Chicago 3 winters ago, was Fabian, her ex, the man who'd thrown her out of his apartment when she was 2 months pregnant, the man who'd blocked her number while she begged for help from a shelter payphone, the man who had no idea that the baby she'd miscarried in that freezing homeless shelter had a successor growing inside her right now, 12 weeks along. And Fabian had absolutely no idea about the platinum wedding band she wore beneath her black leather gloves, or the penthouse in Cheongdam-dong she'd woken up in that morning, or whose child was tucked safely in her womb. Kim Duhan, her husband, Seoul's most dangerous underground emperor. As Amaka's shaking hand found her phone, as Duhan's name lit up the screen with an incoming call, she watched every drop of color abandon Fabian's smug face. He'd just assaulted the wrong woman, and in exactly 9 minutes, when Duhan's motorcade arrived at this mall's private entrance, Fabian was going to understand what it meant to touch something that belonged to the Kim family. But right now, in this suspended moment with Christmas shoppers frozen around them, he still thought she was nothing. He had no idea his entire world was about to collapse. Before we get to the moment when Duhan walks through those doors, and trust me, you need to see what happens next, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. We're bringing you the most intense true stories you won't believe actually happened, and this one is about to get absolutely insane. Turn on notifications because you don't want to miss a single moment of what's coming for Fabian. Now, let's rewind to this morning, to the moment before everything changed. Amaka had opened her eyes that morning to Duhan's hand resting on her lower back, his breathing still slow and even. They'd been married for 7 months. She'd been carrying his child for 3. He didn't know yet. She was waiting for Christmas Day tomorrow, had the whole reveal planned with a gift she'd wrapped and hidden in her closet. A tiny hanbok in the Kim family colors with a note tucked inside that said in careful Korean, "Your heir arrives in July." "You're thinking too loud," Duhan had murmured in Korean, his eyes still closed. His voice was rough with sleep, and even after 7 months, it still did something to her heart. "Can't help it," she'd replied in Korean, her accent still heavy but improving. "Tomorrow's Christmas. I'm excited." He'd opened his eyes then, those dark, calculating eyes that had first locked onto hers at a business dinner in Itaewon 14 months ago. The eyes that saw through everything except, somehow, the secret growing in her belly. "Take Kongpei and Mateo with you today," he'd said, switching to English. "No arguments." "Baby, it's just Christmas shopping in COEX. I'll be fine." His jaw had set in that way that meant the discussion was over. "Amaka, you don't move through Seoul alone anymore. You know what I do. You know the enemies that creates. You know what you mean to me." She'd kissed him instead of fighting. His protectiveness used to feel suffocating when they first married, but she understood now. In his world, love was a weapon people used against you, and she was his only weakness. "Okay, security comes with me." The tension had left his shoulders. He'd pulled her closer, his hand sliding to her stomach in a way that made her breath catch. Did he suspect? Could he tell? "I have a meeting with the Busan families until 7, he'd said. "But tonight we're going somewhere. Dress warm, wear the black coat I bought you." "Where are we going?" "You'll see." That smile, dangerous and devastating in equal measure. "It's a surprise." They'd made love slowly after that, carefully, though he didn't know why she'd stopped him when he'd tried to pull her on top of him, why she'd guided him to positions that kept pressure off her abdomen. And then he'd left her in their penthouse overlooking the Han River, surrounded by luxury she still couldn't quite process as real, carrying a secret that would change absolutely everything. 6 hours later, she was on a mall floor, bleeding, staring up at the face of her past. "Stay down there," Fabian spat, his Gucci suit probably worth more than the entire 3 years he'd spent pretending to love her. "That's where you belong, on the ground." Amaka's vision blurred at the edges. The kick had knocked all the air from her lungs, but her arms stayed locked around her middle, protecting, always protecting now. "Fabian, please," her voice cracked. "Don't. Don't." He laughed, and she remembered that sound, ice cold and blade sharp. "You followed me to Korea? You're actually stalking me now? That's desperate even for you." She hadn't followed him. She'd met Duhan at a dinner, fallen impossibly in love, married into a world she'd never imagined. Seoul was her home now, but Fabian didn't know any of that. Fabian was seeing the girl he'd abandoned in Chicago, not the woman she'd become. Kangpei was there in seconds, his hand inside his jacket where she knew he carried a pistol. Mateo had his phone out, and Amaka knew exactly who he was calling. "Ma'am, are you injured?" Kangpei asked in Korean, his eyes locked on Fabian with an intensity that promised violence. Fabian barely glanced at them. "What, you hired some Korean muscle to make yourself feel important? How much you paying these guys to pretend someone like you matters?" "Sir, step away from her," Kangpei said in heavily accented English, his voice carrying the kind of calm that preceded a storm.
"Or what?" Fabian moved forward aggressively, his American entitlement on full display. It happened fast. Fabian shoved Kangpei, trying to get past him to Amaka. In the chaos, his hand connected with her shoulder, hard, sending her stumbling backward into a cosmetics display. She hit the ground again, crying out, her hands still wrapped protectively around her stomach. The entire mall went silent. Amaka looked up through tears at Fabian standing over her, his face flushed with rage and self-righteousness, and she saw the exact moment Mateo's phone call connected, saw Kangpei's expression shift from protective to absolutely terrified, not for himself, but for what was coming. Her phone rang, Duhan's name on the screen. Her hands shook as she answered. "Amaka." His voice was eerily calm, too calm, the voice he used before people disappeared. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, just a scratch on my lip." "Don't lie to me. Are you hurt?" "My lip is bleeding. I fell twice, but I'm fine. The baby is fine." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Silence. Complete, terrible silence. Then, in a voice carved from ice, "What did you say?" Her eyes closed, the secret she'd been holding pressed against her chest like a physical weight. "I'm 12 weeks pregnant. I was going to tell you tomorrow. I had it all planned, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you're finding out like this." More silence. Then, "Who touched you? Who made you fall?" "My ex, Fabian, from Chicago. But security has him. It's handled." "Put Kangpei on the phone, now." She handed the phone over with trembling hands, watched Kangpei's face go white as he listened. He responded in rapid Korean, too fast for her to catch everything, but she understood enough. "Yes, sir. Injured twice. Bleeding. The American ex-boyfriend. Physical assault. Multiple witnesses. Footage. Yes, sir. We're holding him. Sir," she said. "Yes, sir. We'll secure her immediately. 9 minutes. Understood." He handed the phone back. "Baby, I'm sorry," she started. "I didn't mean to tell you like this." "You're carrying my child." His voice shook. "You're pregnant with my heir, and someone put their hands on you, made you fall, made you bleed." "Takeshi, please don't." "His name is Fabian?" The question was surgical in its precision. "Yes, but—" "The same Fabian who left you homeless and pregnant 3 years ago? The one you told me about? The one who caused you to lose your first child? She'd told him everything one night, months ago, when he'd asked about the sadness he sometimes saw in her eyes. She hadn't expected him to remember every detail. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm 7 minutes away." His voice promised annihilation. "Don't let him leave. If mall security tries to release him, tell them who you are. Use my name. Use my family's name. They'll understand." "Duhan, please." He put his hands on the mother of my child, on my wife, on the woman carrying my heir. There is no universe, no reality, no possibility in which that man walks away from this. The line went dead.
Amaka looked at Kangpei, who now had Fabian face down on the granite, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that looked painful. At Mateo, who'd positioned himself as a human shield between her and everyone else. At the crowd of shoppers with their phones out, recording, murmuring. At Fabian's girlfriend, some blonde woman in head-to-toe Chanel, screaming about assault and lawsuits and American embassy. And she felt cold certainty settle in her bones. Fabian had no idea what he'd done, no idea who she was now, no idea about the child she carried or the man whose ring she wore. Mall security arrived, trying to establish control. They separated everyone, took her to a private medical office, had their on-site nurse clean her split lip and check her over. Kangpei stood guard at the door, his expression grim. "Ma'am," he said quietly in Korean, "Kim Duhan is going to be very, very angry. I know. Not at you, never at you. But what happens when he arrives?" Kangpei trailed off, his jaw tight. "Perhaps you should not watch." But she couldn't leave, wouldn't leave. This was her past colliding violently with her present, and she needed to see it through to the end. Through the office window, she could see Fabian in another room, pacing, gesturing wildly, his girlfriend beside him looking indignant. He looked annoyed, inconvenienced, like this was all some massive overreaction to a simple misunderstanding. He had no idea. Then Duhan arrived. She felt him before she saw him. The mall security supervisor's radio crackled with urgent Korean. His face went white. Suddenly, everyone was standing straighter, moving faster, speaking in hushed, terrified tones. The door opened. Duhan walked in, still wearing his business suit, black Tom Ford, perfectly tailored, but there was nothing civilized about him now. 8 of his men followed, all armed, all wearing the same lethal expression. She recognized some of them from family dinners. These weren't just bodyguards, these were the inner circle, the men who handled problems that needed to disappear. He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hands cupping her face with devastating gentleness. His eyes traveled over her split lip, the redness on her shoulder where she'd been shoved, the way she was unconsciously cradling her stomach. When he looked at her again, she saw murder living behind his eyes. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said in Korean, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every detail. Don't leave anything out." She told him everything, finding Fabian in the mall, his shock at seeing her, how his shock had turned to contempt, the kick, the shove, falling twice. And then, because she couldn't hold it back anymore, she told him about Chicago, about being abandoned, about living in her car, then in a shelter, about the miscarriage in the shelter bathroom with no one to help her, no one to even hold her hand while she lost their baby. Duhan's hands trembled against her face. "You were pregnant before. You lost a child because of him, and you never told me the details. I told you the basics. I didn't want you to know how bad it was, how low I'd fallen."
"You didn't fall. You were pushed." His voice was barely controlled. "And today, while carrying my child, he pushed you again, made you fall twice."
"I'm okay. The baby's okay. The nurse checked."
"That's not the point." He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy? Why was I going to find out tomorrow?"
Because I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted to give you the news as a gift. I wanted to see your face when you realized you were going to be a father. And now everything's ruined, and I'm sorry." He kissed her, hard and desperate and full of something that felt like relief and rage mixed together. "Nothing is ruined. You're safe. Our child is safe. That's all that matters." He pulled back, his jaw set. "Show me which room he's in." Amaka stood, her hand instinctively going to her stomach. The movement was unconscious, protective. Duhan's eyes followed her hand, and something shifted in his expression. Wonder mixed with fear, mixed with fierce, absolute protectiveness. "Stay here," he said softly. "This won't take long. Matteo, stay with her. No one gets near her. No one even looks at her." He walked out, and Amaka moved to the window, despite Matteo's quiet protest. She had to see this, had to witness Fabian finally understanding what he'd lost, what he'd destroyed, what he'd just threatened. Duhan entered the room where Fabian waited with his girlfriend and two mall security guards who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Fabian looked up, annoyed, then dismissive when he saw Duhan. Finally, someone in charge. Fabian's voice dripped with entitlement. "I want to press charges against that woman and her thugs. They assaulted me, held me against my will, and—" Duhan didn't speak, just looked at him with those dark, cold, absolutely empty eyes. "Who are you?" Fabian demanded. "Mall management? Security director? Because I'm going to sue this entire establishment." And Duhan moved. 1 second he was standing still. The next, Fabian was lifted off his feet by the throat, slammed against the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. His girlfriend screamed. Security guards stepped back, hands up, wanting no part of this. "My name," Duhan said in perfect English, his voice deadly calm, "is Kim Duhan. The woman you just assaulted is my wife. Do you understand what that means?" He dropped Fabian, who collapsed, gasping and clawing at his throat. "I don't care who you are," Fabian wheezed. "You can't just—" "You can do anything I want." Duhan's smile was terrifying. "This is my city. These people work for me. This mall exists because I allow it to exist. And that woman you kicked, she's carrying my child, my heir. Do you understand what you've done?" Fabian's face went white. "I didn't know. How could I know she got married? Last time I saw her, she was nothing. Nobody. Just some—" Duhan kicked him in the ribs. The sound of bone cracking echoed through the small room. Fabian's girlfriend screamed again, but no one moved to stop what was happening.
"Let me educate you about reality," Duhan said, crouching beside Fabian's writhing form. 3 years ago, you left my wife homeless and pregnant. She lost that child because of you, because of your cruelty. She survived anyway. She rebuilt herself. She came to Korea and made a new life, and I found her, and I married her, and I gave her everything you failed to give her. Safety, respect, love, a home, a future." He grabbed Fabian's hair, forcing his head up. "And today you saw her again, and instead of apologizing for destroying her life, you kicked her while she was carrying my child. You have committed an offense against the Kim family. Do you understand what that means in this city?" "Please," Fabian whimpered. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was married to someone like you. I'll apologize. I'll do anything." "Your apology means nothing to me." Duhan released him with visible disgust. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to issue a public apology to my wife for everything you did to her in Chicago and everything you did today. You're going to pay full restitution for everything you stole from her 3 years ago with interest. And you're going to leave Korea within 12 hours and never return." "And if I refuse?" Duhan's smile was absolutely chilling. "Then I'll have you arrested for assault against a pregnant woman. I have security footage from 6 different angles. I have 47 witnesses. I have the medical report documenting her injuries. And I have the resources to ensure you spend the next decade in a Korean prison. And I promise you, my reach extends behind those walls. You would not survive your sentence." Fabian was crying now, his expensive suit torn, his ribs clearly broken. "This isn't fair. You can't do this." "I can do anything I want. This is my world." Duhan stood, straightening his suit jacket like he'd just finished a business meeting. "You have until midnight to leave Korea. My men will escort you to the airport. If you miss that flight, I cannot guarantee your safety. Do we understand each other?" Fabian nodded frantically. "Good." Duhan turned to the security guards. "Get him medical attention, then get him out of my sight. If I see his face again, I won't be this generous." He walked out without looking back, leaving Fabian broken and sobbing on the floor. When Duhan returned to the office, Amaka was standing by the window, watching. He closed the door, dismissed everyone else with a gesture, and they were alone. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly in Korean. 3 months, since October."
3 months? He said it like he was testing the words. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" "Because the first time I got pregnant, I lost the baby at 9 weeks. I wanted to make it past the first trimester before I told you, before I let myself believe it was real, before I let you believe it was real. I couldn't bear the thought of telling you and then losing another child." He crossed to her, his hands gentle on her face again, tilting her head up so she had to meet his eyes. "You thought I would blame you if something went wrong? I thought you might leave, like Fabian did, like everyone does eventually." Pain flashed across his face. "Amaka, I would never leave you. Not for any reason, not in any universe. Do you understand me?" "I do now." "We're going to a hospital right now. I need doctors to confirm you and the baby are completely fine. Then we're going home and you're not leaving our penthouse until I say you can." "Duhan!" "I'm not asking." His voice was steel, wrapped in velvet. "Someone hurt you while you were carrying my child. You fell twice. You were bleeding. I will not take any chances with your safety or our baby's safety. So you will let me take you to the hospital, and you will let me protect you, and you will not argue with me. Yes?" She nodded because she could hear the fear underneath his control. The absolute terror that he might lose her, lose their child, lose the family he'd never thought he'd have. "Yes," she whispered. "Okay." He picked her up carefully, carrying her out of the office. His men formed a protective circle so tight no one could get within 10 feet of them. And Amaka let herself rest against his chest, feeling safe for the first time since seeing Fabian. In the car heading to Samsung Medical Center, where Duhan had apparently called ahead to have his personal physician and the head of obstetrics waiting, he held her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Tell me about losing the first baby," he said quietly. "I need to know everything." So she told him the whole story. How Fabian had seemed happy at first when she told him, how he'd even helped her buy a crib, paint the nursery in their apartment, pick out names, how she'd believed they'd be a family, how she'd come home from her teaching job one day to find him gone, her bank account emptied, her jewelry missing, and a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm 28. I'm not ready to be trapped by a kid. Figure it out yourself." I tried calling, texting. His number was disconnected. His friends wouldn't tell me where he went. His family blocked me. I lost the apartment after 2 weeks, lost my job because I couldn't focus. I lived in my car for a while, but then it got repossessed because I couldn't make payments. I ended up in a shelter.
Duhan's grip on her hand tightened until it was almost painful. "I tried to eat, tried to stay healthy for the baby,
But there wasn't enough food, and what food there was I couldn't keep down. I was stressed constantly, scared, alone. And then one morning there was blood everywhere, and I knew. The shelter volunteer drove me to a free clinic. They confirmed the miscarriage, told me it was likely caused by malnutrition and stress, gave me a pamphlet about social services. And then I got angry. I decided I would never be that vulnerable again. I worked 3 jobs for a year, saved every penny, applied for teaching positions overseas because I wanted to escape everything that reminded me of that time in my life. Korea offered me a position teaching English at an international school in Itaewon, so I came here. I was supposed to be a teacher. And then you met me. And then I met you at that terrible business dinner where I was invited as a cultural consultant and felt completely out of place. You walked up to me and asked in terrible English if I hated networking events as much as you did. He smiled slightly. My English is better now. Because I've been teaching you for 14 months. She squeezed his hand. You saved me, Duhan. You gave me a life I never imagined possible. You saved yourself, he said seriously. You survived homelessness, miscarriage, abandonment. You came to a foreign country alone and started over. You learned a new language. You built a new life. I just recognized what everyone else was too blind to see. You're the strongest person I've ever met. At Samsung Medical Center, they were ushered immediately into a private wing. Dr. Park was waiting, along with Dr. Kim, the head of obstetrics. They were kind and thorough, checking Amaka completely, doing an ultrasound right there in the private room. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Kim said in English for Amaka's benefit, then repeated in Korean for Duhan. The baby is healthy, strong heartbeat. You're measuring exactly at 12 weeks and 3 days. The fall didn't cause any damage to the placenta or the fetus. You'll be sore for a few days, and I want to see you back here in 1 week for a follow-up, but everything is fine. Duhan's relief was visible. He thanked both doctors profusely, then turned to the ultrasound screen where their baby was frozen in mid-movement, tiny and perfect. That's our child, he said in Korean, his voice thick with emotion. That's our child, Amaka confirmed. He stared at the screen for a long moment, and when he looked at her again, his eyes were wet. I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a father. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, gentle kisses full of reverence and wonder. I will protect you both with everything I am. You will never be hungry again, never homeless, never alone, never afraid. I promise you this on my family name. I know. She believed him, absolutely and completely. That night, back in their Cheongdam-dong penthouse, they lay in bed with Duhan's hand on her stomach, feeling for movement that wouldn't come for weeks yet. Amaka told him about her fears, that she'd lose this baby too, that she wasn't strong enough to be a mother, that she'd never be enough for him. And he told her about his own childhood, growing up in violence, watching his father build an empire on blood and fear. I want our child to have better, he said quietly. I want them to grow up safe, loved, free to choose their own path, even if that path leads away from this world I built. They will, because they'll have you as a father. 2 days later, on Christmas morning, Fabian's public apology went viral. He stood in front of cameras, looking haggard and defeated, his ribs clearly bandaged beneath his shirt, and confessed everything. The theft 3 years ago, abandoning Amaka while pregnant, the assault in Seoul. He apologized to Amaka specifically, named her, said he was entering therapy and leaving Korea permanently. The internet responded with predictable fury. Fabian Hamilton became an overnight cautionary tale. His reputation was destroyed. His girlfriend had apparently left him, and Amaka felt nothing watching it. No satisfaction,
No vindication, just relief that the chapter was finally closed. She deleted the video after watching it once, blocked Fabian on every platform, and focused on her future. On Christmas evening, Duhan took her to Namsan Tower. They rode the cable car up, had dinner at the revolving restaurant, and afterward he led her to the terrace where thousands of love locks lined the railings. He handed her a lock, silver, engraved with their names and today's date. "For new beginnings," he said, fastening it to the railing. "For the family we're building, for everything we're going to become." She gave him his gift then, a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was the ultrasound picture and a note she'd spent hours perfecting in Korean. "Your heir arrives in July. You're going to be a father. I love you." He cried. This dangerous man who controlled Seoul's underground empire cried while holding a grainy black and white photo of their child. "I love you," he whispered in Korean. "Both of you, my family, my everything, my whole world." 7 months later, Amaka gave birth to a daughter in the private wing of Samsung Medical Center. They named her Jiwoo. She had Duhan's dark eyes and Amaka's smile, and from the moment she entered the world, she was loved beyond measure. Fabian never returned to Korea. Amaka heard through former Chicago friends that he'd moved to Australia, changed his name, started over. She didn't care. That life was gone. She had everything that mattered here. On Jiwoo's first birthday, Amaka stood in their Cheongdam-dong penthouse, watching Duhan hold their daughter, singing to her in Korean. And she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain, the loss, the slow, painful rebuilding, the unexpected love that had changed everything. Fabian had tried to destroy her, had kicked her while she was carrying new life, carrying hope, carrying the future. But she survived, she rose, and now she stood in a home filled with love, holding a future she'd built from the absolute ruins of her past. Duhan looked up, caught her watching, and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "How far we've come. How lucky I am." "I'm the lucky one." He kissed Jiwoo's head, then crossed to Amaka, pulling her into their embrace. "You gave me everything I never thought I could have. A real home, a family, a reason to be more than what I was raised to be. We gave each other everything." And as they stood there, the three of them wrapped in evening light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, Amaka knew that some stories that begin in absolute darkness end in light more beautiful than anything you dared to dream. Fabian had been her past, but Duhan and Jiwoo were her future, her present, her everything. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had someone from your past show up and realize you'd completely transformed your life? What happened? Drop your story below. I read every single comment.